Right, today we're going to go over basically the beginning of Rome's history here and working Rome. So again, when we look at Rome, the Roman Empire is vast, about 1,000 years or so. So it's a long history. So we're going to kind of talk about the beginning, talk about how they became a republic, and then eventually we'll get to the shift from being a republic to eventually to an empire. After the death of Julius Caesar. So let's go ahead and get started here. From the beginning, this is Rome's, I guess you could say, creation story. Uh, a Definitely a myth, but I kind of want to get into it because it kind of explains the background of Rome and why they're so violent at first. So you have Romulus and Remus, which were twin baby boys who are said to be thrown into the Tiber River. You can see the baby boys right here. Thrown into the Tiber River by an evil uncle, and they are helped by a she wolf, which you can see right here. They're raised by a shepherd, and they built a city where the shepherd had found them. Once they get older. Romulus, one of the brothers, will build a city wall, and his brother Remus mocks him, saying that the wall is too small. Therefore, of course, Romulus kills him in anger and names the city after himself. That's where Rome gets its name. Okay, so just kind of an interesting creation story here for ancient Rome. Now, again, their influence, Rome was extremely violent at first, and actually, Rome itself was mainly just kind of like a city of outcasts. And again, Rome, take a look, it started out as just this small city in the middle of the Italian peninsula. And obviously, it'll grow, to cover all of this area they can see here in orange. But at the beginning, they just accepted outcasts, pretty much, criminals, people that were crazy. A lot of, Rome didn't really have very many women, so they actually went to neighboring towns, neighboring cities, captured women, and brought them back. So again, Rome's beginning history is very violent and just very obscure here. So at the beginning, they'll have about 200 years of continuous warfare. And again, like I just said, starts out as a small city in the middle of the Italian peninsula, and it'll grow to be one of the greatest, empires that the world has ever seen. So geography, just like we've done for every unit of the year, Rome located in that Italian peninsula, okay, right along the Mediterranean Sea here. Obviously, we talked about that with Greece, which you can see over here. So being surrounded by water, obviously it's a perfect spot for trade. They also have Apennine Mountains that run more like a backbone. When we talked about Greece, the mountains broke up the entire country. They were covered in three-quarters mountains. So it's hard to unify the people. It's completely different than Italy here, where the mountains do not separate the people. They just run like a backbone, kind of making for protection on one side here. They also have more fertile farmland compared to Greece. Remember, a lot of Greece was rocky. They had to rely on trade or conquering other people to get their farm materials. Whereas Italy here, you're able to farm, you have plenty of farmable land, and also because of your location, you're able to create this great trading empire as well. So Rome, okay, the city of Rome. Where's my mouse? City of Rome. You can see right here, which will be the commercial center of Italy. Now they enjoy easy access to the Mediterranean via the Tiber River. Okay, so the Tiber River will allow them to get to the Mediterranean here. However, it's not on the coast, which means that they're safe, or I shouldn't say safe, but safer from attack by the sea, and obviously safer from invasion because it's not a city right on the coast right here. Now, by the 6th century, trade routes from all parts of Italy would converge into Rome. And whenever Rome went out and conquered a new territory, they had those people they conquered build roads that would connect to the city of Rome, hence the expression, all roads lead to Rome. Now, the Romans are going to be influenced by three groups of people. You have the Latins who settled in the Tiber River Valley. Obviously, it'll give the Romans their language. The Greeks, okay, will settle in the southern portion of Italy and in Sicily, and then the Etruscans as well. It will help kind of influence the way that a lot of the Romans dressed too. The idea of a classical culture like the Greeks had, advancements of science, math, astronomy, philosophy, all that stuff, will influence the Romans as well. So, a republic. Okay, so a republic is a form of government in which the power rests with the citizens who have the right to vote. Now, in Rome, very similar to when we talked about Athens. Only free-born male adult citizens could vote, so not everyone could vote. And you're kind of broken up into, I mean, there's always subsects, but if we're going to kind of look into two major uh, socioeconomic groups here, it'd be the patricians, which would be your wealthy, your landowners, and your plebeians, your plebs, common farmers, your artists, merchants. So again, there are different subsections of these groups, but these are the two main social groups that we see here. So the goal of a republic is to prevent any individual from gaining too much power, and the political term for that would be checks and balances. Okay, so again, having different branches that are able to check on one another to make sure they're not getting too powerful. Now, the 12 tables are going to be basically a law code that will be displayed publicly for everyone to see. Be forced by the plebeians that interpretation of the laws were limited. So again, I want to make sure that everyone understands the laws. That way, the patricians just couldn't mold the laws to fit them as they needed. So we're going to see three groups in the Roman government. You have your Senate, which will start off as 300 members. You have your consuls, which are your rulers of Rome, and then a dictator, which would be only be in time of war. So really, you only had two groups. You could potentially have the third if you needed that dictator during the time of war. Now, how do the 12 tables affect us today? The idea of being innocent until proven guilty comes from the 12 tables. So your Senate, which would technically be the most powerful governing body, you have 300 members, all of the patrician class. You don't have any plebeians on the Senate as of yet. And not only that, but you serve for life. Okay, so you get this job, let's say, you get it at 35, 40 years old, whatever. You have this job for the rest of your life. Your job as a Senate member is to issue decrees, interpret laws, and then you are the ones that are going to elect the consuls rule. So when the people voted, they're not voting for this position right here, like how we vote for our president today. They're voting for the Senate members. The Senate members will then choose the rulers of Rome. Okay, so that's how the Roman Republic worked. The consuls, you would have two of them. Okay, so you had two. It wasn't just like how we have one president, they had two consuls. Now, here you only serve 1 year terms. Okay, so the goal of that was to prevent anybody from, getting too powerful or holding power for too long. The problem is by having two consuls, obviously they would disagree. Okay, you didn't have two, so you had to try to get two to be on the same page. They could veto acts of the other consuls. So again, veto just literally means I forbid. Okay, so you can see why having two consuls might become a headache. If these two guys can never get on the same terms. Their job was to basically supervise the business of the government and then also to command the armies. Now, a dictator. This was only during times of national emergency, and the dictator, just like any dictator does, they hold absolute power. They would serve for 6 months at a time. Okay, so a problem that could arise with such short amount of time of control is obviously one, trying to get anything done in 6 months. When you look at government, it's almost impossible. It takes a lot. You can also look at it from another standpoint is this dictator knows they only have, half a year to serve as dictator. They're going to try to get as much accomplished as possible in that short amount of time. Roman family. We did a lot with this. If we do our Roman project, obviously this year we're not able to do that. But their family was the center of Roman life, okay, the most important unit in Roman society. The father was known as paterfamilias, and the mother was known as materfamilias. The religion, now later on in the Roman Empire, we would talk about, we'll see if we're able to get to it this year, the rise of Christianity. But again, at the beginning of Rome's history, they were polytheistic, believing in multiple gods, and they adopted and identified with a lot of gods of the Greeks. Okay, so again, if you looked at, when we did our Greek cube or our Greek god and goddess project earlier this year, you looked at different gods and goddesses and what they controlled. Same thing here in Rome, except a lot of the gods, goddesses took on planet names that we know now today. So you have like Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, what have you. Also, the idea of Hercules. Okay, so it was actually Heracles in Greece. It wasn't until the Romans adopted and called him Hercules, and that's why we call him Hercules here today. So if you look at Italy here, we already kind of went over it. What are the most notable geographic features of Italy? Obviously, Surrounded by water. Okay, surrounded by water. So again, we'll create a great trading empire. Now, let's see. I think this will be the last slide we get, and we'll get one more. Okay, so the Roman army. I'll post this video in Classroom as well, so you can watch it. The Roman army was an extremely well-disciplined fighting force. They used this idea of decimation, which you can see right here. Decimation, which basically, if let's say, for example, you're guarding, where you're supposed to have night shift, night watch, you're supposed to stay awake all night, you fell asleep on guard duty, whatever, they would take your legion and they would line them up, all your 5,000 men, and they would go down a line and count to 10. Every 10th person would be either tortured or put to death. Okay, so again, forcing people to be well disciplined, because if you didn't, well, now you were getting, your buddies potentially killed. Now, once they went out and conquered lands, they made these people profess loyalty to Rome. They would pay taxes and they would supply soldiers for the Roman army. Some people chose citizenship, and then the soldiers would be occupied and they'd be posted in foreign lands, just like how we have, hundreds of our military bases all over the world. The Romans did the same thing. They would have soldiers constantly posted in different countries that would now become obviously part of the Roman Empire, but still they'd have different posts for military branches. And they would build roads, like I said earlier, that would link the provinces together, and all roads would lead back to Rome. And eventually, the locals began to adopt, the Latin language, their customs, and Roman beliefs too. Okay, we'll save the Punic Wars for later on. We'll kind of leave it there for now. So again, make sure you go back to Google Classroom, and I'll post this Roman army video for you to watch there.